This vegan pho is up there with the best beef pho I've ever made. There's so much there, and we did it all without meat, MSG, fish sauce, or anchovy salt. Silky pho noodles immersed in a natural umami broth made purely from select fresh vegetables and infused with my traditional pho spices. This is Pho Chay, vegan pho. I've been meaning to share this recipe for a while since writing my chicken pho recipe. This recipe is adapted from many learnings through life. So far, I've volunteered at my local temple. From eating my mum's pho chay, who was a devoted vegetarian, to experiencing many bowls through the streets and temples of Vietnam. The key to making a delicious vegan pho is knowing how to build layers of natural sweetness and umami in the broth without the use of meat or umami-filled ingredients that we're so used to, such as fish sauce and anchovy sauce. But let me show you how to nail vegan pho broth every time. Let's put the E's in Vietnamese. When making a vegan pho, the choice and selection of fresh vegetables is critical because you don't want to overdo it. I'm going to start with some radish today. This is daikon radish. If you can't get your hands on this, simply grab some turnips. 3 turnips will be just fine. Some carrots for sweetness. And some zucchinis. Zucchinis, in my opinion, in this recipe is the secret ingredient. But there's a little hot tip. You're going to have to peel the skin off. The skin can sometimes be a little bit bitter. But secondly, it will turn your broth into a Grinch or a Hulk looking broth. It will turn green. So I'm going to quickly shave all this off. And don't be afraid of keeping the tops on. That's fine. It's not going to... The zucchinis add a really nice sweetness to it. And if you can't get zucchinis, want to fancy it up a little bit and get a bit oriental with it, you can also use sinh qua, which is a gourd. We call it muop in Vietnamese. Very similar to zucchini. It's got that multiple seeds, lots of sweetness. It breaks down, but not completely when cooked. But yeah, beautiful sweetness for your broth. So you can see, I'm being very, very careful to make sure I remove all of that green peel. And if you're using an Asian vegetable peel at home, make sure you dry it immediately after use because it is carbon steel and it will rust. You can see that, it's a force of habit for me every time I use it. All right, let's just chop that up in nice little segments. Add it to the pile. And in it goes. We're gonna add some corn. Again, nice sweetness, and the cob has this real earthy sweetness to it as well. Brown onion that I've just nicked the bottom off. Some ginger. And some beautiful spring onion stalks. And coriander stalks as well. And if the coriander stalks have the root there, keep that as well. Beautiful flavour for your vegan pho. All right, that's all done. I want to bring this over to the sink. We'll top it up with some water. Bring that to the boil. Lovely. Let that sweetness infuse into the broth. Healthy pinch of salt. Maybe a little bit more. There we go. Beautiful. Okay. We're going to bring that to the boil. The vegetables look amazing. We're going to let that simmer for about 60 minutes. But in terms of vegetables, the ones that you really want to avoid, that's a common question I get, is basically anything starchy, such as potatoes, sweet potato. They will tend to thicken the broth. But yeah, let's bring that to the boil. And in the meantime, let's talk umami. Mushrooms are a key component in this recipe. It allows us to build a tasty pho broth without added MSG, fish sauce, or anchovy salt. Look, raw mushrooms don't do anything for me. Don't really have much flavour, a little bit of sweetness, but it really lacks that savoury umaminess. But when cooked, the natural umami in them intensify, and the texture is out of this world. All right, let's grab a fry pan. Let's stop chin wagging. I'm gonna put that on. I'm gonna show you this special technique. All right, this is what I like to call, and something I learned from a good friend of mine called Jim. It's called boiling mushrooms. All right, so that pan's nice and hot. Gonna go in with a bit of oil. Lovely. Let that warm through. It's nice. And I don't have a huge pot, but it doesn't matter. I'll show you why. We'll put some mushrooms in. You won't fit them all in at once. We've got a nice selection here today as well. With some oysters, just dropping mushrooms everywhere. Button mushrooms, shiitake. So in we go, nice and generous. But as we cook this, what's going to happen is they're going to shrink and the water's going to seep out a little bit, which will give us a bit more volume or space to put more mushrooms in. Lovely, and I've got the heat on quite high at the moment. It's gone with a bit of salt. Lovely. And that's it. We're going to just quickly saute this until we can put more mushrooms in. And keep doing that until all your mushrooms are in. So as soon as that moisture is almost all gone, what we're going to do, and this might sound a little bit crazy, we're going to pop some water into it. And we're going to keep frying it. We're going to boil the mushrooms until that evaporates. And in doing so, what's going to happen with the mushrooms is you're going to suck up all that moisture, but they'll transform its texture into something a bit meaty. But in terms of the flavor, it unlocks the hidden, natural, earthy umami in the mushrooms. And don't be afraid when adding water, evaporating, adding water, then evaporating, because when doing this, the mushrooms, they won't break down. Thank God for science. We'll repeat this step with the water and the mushrooms about 4 or so more times. We'll be here for about 15 minutes, but that's okay. We've got a bit of time with the broth. But in between that, once the mushrooms are done, all we have to do is soak the dried noodles, prepare the garnishes, and before you know it, it'll be time to strain our broth. Easy, huh? Look at the color of that broth. It's crystal clear. And that's the beauty when you're using vegetables as the base as opposed to meat. There's just basically no impurities at all. But the most important pho element is my pho spices sachet, which contains 8 essential pho spices. And if you haven't got one already, grab one from our online store. And I almost forgot to mention, there's also some rock sugar. So in that goes. We're gonna let that steep in there for about 30 minutes. Oh, the fragrance is instant. So that's in. All we have to do now is we get our meaty and umami mushrooms into the pot. We'll boil that for 30 minutes, like I said, and it'll be ready to fix up a delicious bowl of pho Chay. The broth is to the boil, and it's really important. Let's get that broth in. It smells fantastic. Look at that, get those mushrooms in there. Lovely. Get a bit of tofu. Oh yeah, get in there. Get in. Beautiful. All right, let's garnish it. Bit of pepper. Spring onions, coriander, lovely. Bean sprouts. Bit of sawtooth coriander, really just shred that, rip that, get that in there. Some few chilies. Salivating. And I've got some hoisin sauce here on the side. Now remember my rule, don't pop that in a homemade broth. You'll completely ruin it. Remember, home cooked pho, no hoisin. It's too pure to add something completely processed into that. All right, let's mix this up and give it a whirl, hey? I'm so excited, I've even forgotten to get myself a spoon. Oh, I reckon I want to put more broth in there. See that? See how it just all absorbed in? Let's get some more broth in there. Don't be stingy with homemade broth. Oh, the heat. Let's try some of the mushrooms. Mmm. Wow, get around that. Get around that. I'm gonna have to jump the gun here, guys. Do yourself a favour for flavour. The umami and savouriness and earthiness in this dish is just insane. There's so much there, and we did it all without meat, MSG, fish sauce, or anchovy salt. I'm calling it. This vegan pho is up there with the best beef pho I've ever made. If you want something light and refreshing and a change up from the traditional beef pho style, give this recipe a whirl. Go on, I'm gonna say it again. Guess what? Do yourself a favour for flavour.